is ESPN News' special presentation of the NFL Draft.
Will this class of '99 be similar to the class of 1983?
Today, the first selection choice belongs to the Cleveland Browns, who are now on the clock.
We're going to start this already.
Yes, we will.
We just started this thing here.
Well, it's early, but we'll start.
The Cleveland Browns selection is from the University of Kentucky, quarterback Tim Couch.
He is the president, at least in Cleveland.
Philadelphia Eagles had some terrible drafts along the way.
The Philadelphia Eagles select Donovan McNabb, quarterback, Syracuse University.
I hope the fans don't take it out on Donovan McNabb.
No, they better not. A duck. Try to follow in the footsteps.
The Cincinnati Bengals select Akili Smith, quarterback, University of Oregon.
He was basically an undrafted free agent when the season started.
I think you have to go the running back.
I think this might be your first real curveball in the draft.
The Indianapolis Colts select Edgerrin James, running back, University of Miami.
Ricky Williams is pissed.
We feel that Edgerrin gives us a little bit more what we want to do with our offense.
With the fifth pick in the draft, the New Orleans Saints select Ricky Williams, running back, University of Texas.
I know what I can do, and I've done it for 4 years, so hopefully I can keep on doing it.
Gone golfing.
The 11th pick in the draft, Dante Culpepper. With the 12th pick in the draft, Cade McNown.
We have never had this many quarterbacks go this high, and this one may be one of the more historic by the time it is over. It's a good job there, ladies and gents, back in the studio in Bristol and in the certainly in the truck here in New York. And welcome to ESPN2's continued coverage of the first day of the NFL Draft. We're here for the remainder of the second round, all the third round. Mel Kiper, Joe Theismann, I'm Chris Berman. We have a cast of thousands all around the league. We'll be going and interviewing coaches and GMs around the league, getting our reporters involved. And speaking of which, the Miami Dolphins did several trades and got a couple of running backs in the second round. James Johnson, drafted by James Johnson. And for the first time, the Dolphins have drafted a running back from Syracuse in '68. They had pretty good success when the guy's name was Larry Zonka. At that point, they've gone back and drafted Rob Conrad, running back Syracuse. R. Hank Goldberg with Jimmy Johnson about the additions to his offensive backfield. Hammer?
Thanks, Boomer. Well, we got a very happy Jimmy Johnson here. And yesterday, when we were chatting about running backs and the name of J.J. Johnson, you looked a little horrified.
Well, you know, we've been keeping it quiet all along. You know, of course, you know, we love the two running backs with, you know, with Williams and Edgerrin James. But when you look at James Johnson, he had 15 runs over 20 yards. Edgerrin James had 13 runs over 20 yards. I mean, this guy is a big back, 230 pounds. He breaks tackles. His psychological tests were, you know, at the very top. You know, we had him, and had we not been able to trade out of 24, we're going to take him right there at 24. I think really, really quality back. And then the bonus, our second pick at 24 would have been Conrad. And we were able to get a couple of extra picks, move back up, and get Conrad, who I think just a quality football player.
Jimmy, when you traded out at 24, 15 picks came before you got to Johnson. Were you a little nervous as you sat there and watched no running backs being selected? And how did you know?
Well, no, actually, you know, we made the trade from 24 to 27, and we felt pretty comfortable about that we could still get Johnson. And then, you know, when I started making the trade from 27 all the way down into the second round, a couple of scouts behind me said, no, no, no. and you know, I looked back, and they said, hey, we'll never get him, you know, if we go that far down to 39. And so, you know, I had second thoughts about it and said, well, maybe I shouldn't have made this trade. You know, maybe I was trying to play it a little bit too close. And as it turned out, we sweated it out. I felt like after we got into the second round that those teams really didn't want running backs. And so I felt a little bit better. And then, of course, we were really excited when we were able to get him.
How will you use these two guys, and what does that mean to Kareem and Avery and your other running backs?
Well, you know, Avery, first of all, is going to be just like what we said when we drafted him last year. He is going to be a kick return guy, and he's going to be a big play, you know, third down type back. Now, Kareem, you know, he goes right into the picture. Kareem's rushed for right 3,000 yards in the last 3 years. But Johnson and Conrad, they give us the big backs that we've been looking for.
As we could say, Jimmy Johnson always gets his men. Back to you, Boomer.
All right, Hank, Coach, thank you very much. We'll be checking in with Miami all around the league, obviously, as our coverage continues here on ESPN2. Let's get you caught up now Some of the picks you know if you're watching on ESPN before. Kevin Falk, we went through that one, LSU going to New England. Now, Fred Vinson, cornerback, Vandy with a pin in his leg, and we'll talk about that in a moment, but a very good player, certainly to the injury. Russell Davis, defensive tackle, North Carolina, goes to Chicago, and Joe Montgomery, running back, just selected by the New York Football Giants. Mel, let's start with Fred Vinson. Ron Wolf said, hey, I picked one defensive back in the first round. I'm going to go with 4 more. Do you like it? Certainly his potential is great.
Well, it would have been a first-rounder, Chris, had it not been for a foot injury in October. It sidelined him the rest of the year. Prior 3 years, the Vanderbilt defense, led by Vinson and his cousin Corey Chavis at the other corner, held Peyton Manning and Tennessee's offense to 12, 14, and 17 points. A lot of players moved on. Vinson was injured. Things went awry for the Vanderbilt defense, but you see the coverage ability. 5'10 in a corner, 177. Not the big, strong, physical defensive back that Chavis is, but he's more of a true cover man, and he has the ball reaction skills you look for. As I said before, he would have been probably a late first rounder if it wasn't for the injury. He's been clocked at 4.3, so at this stage of the game, if you know he's going to be ready for training camp, makes good value and good sense at that point. Russell Davis is interesting. He's bigger than he's ever been. He's up to over 290. Wasn't that way early in his career. 169 career tackles, and of course battle tested against top teams. Remember, he played on the same defensive line with Holiday and Greg Ellis, this year with Ecubon. He was steady all year. Not a dominator on a game-to-game basis, but very steady, very consistent, more of a stay-at-home type. So I think he can occupy space in the middle and in a 4-3 scheme be the kind of defensive tackle I think they're looking for. And of course, when you look at the Chicago Bears, they needed some size and some muscle in that defensive line, and Russell Davis gives you a 290-pound frame with a little athleticism mixed in.
Now, the Giants have just gone with Joe Montgomery. Now, here's a guy that you didn't hear much about last year, again, for good reason.
Well, he was injured, and I think that's the thing. He came back from a knee, and of course he played well this year, but he was a backup to Michael Wiley. Late in the season, he came on strong, had a phenomenal East-West Shrine game, which I think moved him up dramatically. And Joe Montgomery showed in that game he was completely recovered from that knee injury of a couple of years ago. And you're looking at a big back, a compact 227-pounder, who certainly has the ability to get outside or run between the tackles, and a decent pass receiver. So you're looking at a guy that I think the East-West Shrine game and Joe Montgomery made him a second-round pick. When going into that game, he looked like maybe a 4th or 5th rounder, Chris.
Giants, so they're hoping here a little bit, Joe, yeah. but I mean, they certainly need some juice in the running game. There's no question about that.
They need some excitement everywhere. This
yes,
is not a very explosive football team. And one of the things when I talked to Jim Fossil this week, he basically said, we need to be more explosive. I think that this running back, I think Joe Montgomery gives him a running back, maybe like what he'd hoped Tyrone Wheatley could have been, a big back with a versatility and to be able to explode through. You've got Gary Brown. Gary's a big, tough, or a little tough guy rolling around. Tiki Barber was nicked up. Tiki's got to come back with a big year in a productive way catching the football. And then, of course, you got Charles Way. Charles is a big knock him down, go run over you type of guy. Montgomery might just give him a little bit more of the elusiveness that they need in the backfield when they want to run the football. I think it's a good pick. I think the Giants have done very well with their first 2 picks.
Speaking of good and interesting picks, we have just had our 6th quarterback go here today. 5, of course, in the first 12. And Tampa Bay, yes, they got Eric Zier in a trade, but Tampa Bay is selected in the 2nd round Sean King, Tulane. Now, here's a guy that took a losing program, said they would be undefeated last year, or they would be a great, and what happened? Undefeated. He's a winner, Mel.
Oh, he's a winner. He turned that program around. He worked in a complex offense led by, of course, Tommy Bowden, who has since moved on. But when you look at Sean King, very experienced, very accurate. He's 6 feet tall, but he has sound mechanics. You watch him here drop back. Excellent touch to Juwan Dawson. I think that's the key. He can be stick it in there when he has to. He can show some touch when he has to. There, the poise and the presence. Snap, ball awry, picked it up, and made a play. So I think you're looking at a guy that's going to come into the NFL with a lot of experience behind him, a guy that's a winner. Here, you're watching the ability to escape. Quarterback draw taken in the end zone. I like this kid. You talked about Cade McNown as the #1 pick. Joe, overall, well, he went in the middle of the first round to Chicago. There's very little separating Sean King from Cade McNown, and I think certainly at this stage for Tampa Bay, he's a major league bargain, a real steal at this stage.
I like him here for a couple reasons. And first of all, let's talk about the young man. He played a lot of the season with a broken bone in his wrist. That tells me an awful lot about an individual's character. He wanted to be on the football field, and he did the job he had to do. I also feel like he's not a threat to Trent Dilfer. He's a guy who can come in. Now, Trent plays well, that's fine. But here's a guy where the Tampa Bay Buccaneers feel like, okay, we've got a pretty darn efficient passer. Take a look at where he is. 183.3 rating. Look at the all-time leaders in passing efficiency. Wuerffel, McMahon, Detmer.